I would like to start again by thanking Rockford University, Nicole, and the Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. Nicole, did I say it right?
You got it. Yes, thank you.
Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. Okay. And everyone who joins us today, thank you for supporting the series. Brown Bag series, as you might know, are organized by Professor Marlene Loyola and myself. The presentation today is by Dr. Kyle Stedman. It's supposed to start right now and end around like 3:30, and then we'll get the Q&A session. We plan to finish everything around like 3:50 p.m. So let me first introduce you, not first, but right now, let me introduce you Kyle Stedman, Dr. Kyle Stedman. Kyle Stedman is Associate Professor of English at Rockford University, where he serves as Writing Across the Curriculum Director, Writing Center Director, and Interim Chair of English Department. He teaches courses in first-year composition, professional writing, creative nonfiction, and composing with sound. When he is finished with his 3 ongoing scholarly projects, he is eager to start writing the story of his historic home. I'm very curious about that, Kyle. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kyle Stedman. Please, Kyle Stedman, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Orhan. Thanks everyone for being here. I threw that random line about my historic home because I've been actually emailing with a wonderful 80-year-old woman whose mother grew up in the house that I'm in now. And just yesterday, she dropped off her very first packet of photos of the house in 1915 and things like that. And it's on my mind a lot. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But that's not what we're here for. I'm here to talk through and practice and inspire us to have some ideas about informal exploratory writing assignments, especially, of course, if we're teaching in the classroom, but hopefully just to give us ways to think about exploratory writing in our own lives. Some of you, if you do this sort of thing on your own and in class, this might all sound really old hat and you're like, I know all of this already. I'm glad you're here too, because there are going to be a couple of places for conversation. So I'm hoping we can share some ideas together and, like I said, kind of inspire ourselves. A couple things at the beginning. I am working here through a big Google Doc that I'm going to be scrolling up and down in. I thought that gave me the chance to take some notes on some of the things that you tell me, as opposed to a PowerPoint where you're kind of presenting. And I'm like, well, I'm not presenting as much as I'm like facilitating. So it seemed more natural to do this. This is a Google Doc that lives online though. So if you want, you can get to it through this tiny URL. I'll drop it in the chat here as well. You can look at that now if you want, but you don't have to. It kind of depends on your style, right? Do you want to follow the screen as I'm going, or would you rather have it open in your own screen? But you will see there'll be a few places where I'll put links in here. And if you're like, Kyle, I can't click the link in your document when you're sharing the screen, that's because I'm assuming you'll get back to it later. Also, I will ask everyone to do, if we have time, a couple of short exploratory writing assignments of our own right now. So if you have something open, some document, some way to handwrite, I'm not going to ask you to give me those, but I will ask you to do that, just so you know. So with that, I'm just gonna dive in. You can see a little of our agenda here. First, a very, very quick background of kind of what we're doing, why we're doing this. In some ways, this is part of the Brown Bag series, of course, but in some ways, I almost feel like this is a special sub-series of the Brown Bag series. I think most of you know that in May 2019, the faculty voted as part of our new Gen Ed program to allow other departments to teach writing intensive courses. That's the equivalent of RET 351, not equivalent, but to allow students to check the same checkbox that RET 351 currently allows. So the following year, I spent a lot of time asking people, what should those look like? What do we as the faculty want those writing intensive courses to be, and what kind of guidelines do we want to have? And those just finally got voted on, implemented last December. So this year is my first year as officially calling myself WAC director, writing across the curriculum director. And I'm saying this now to emphasize that when we started talking about this, I feel like we could have just said, let's just have some writing intensive courses. You know, let's just do it. Let's agree on some parameters and move on. And one thing I'm trying to do is to make writing intensive courses one part of a larger conversation. I'm kind of trying to use this as a jumping off point to say, well, if we're talking more about writing, let's talk more about writing. Let's have more workshops like this. Let's have more online resources that I'm helping curate to help get you the support that you need to teach writing in whatever context you're in. Let's make sure that I have the time in my schedule to be able to work one-on-one with you to help you do what you need to do. So that's kind of our context here. I'm thinking of this. That's why this is the first of 2 writing workshops this semester. But if we move on, I want to stop talking for a little bit, and I actually want to, like I said, ask you to do a little bit of writing. And I want to take you away from the classroom necessarily. I want you to think about writing that you do or writing that you have done. You can see this says, think of a writing project. And I really mean any writing project. Maybe there's a scholarly book or an essay that you've done. Maybe there's something that you remember being on the job and you had to work on this report over time. Mike, I'm thinking of of your accreditation type thing. So anything essentially.
Oh gosh, I'm not going to write about that.
Anything that you had to do some research on and that required multiple writing sessions. And all I want you to do is just think about all of the writing that you did to help you produce that document. What did you have to do to make that happen? And I'm specifically thinking about writing anything, even if it's just like a note taking, even if it's like you wrote something on your hand at dinner one time, who knows? So I am going to time us. I'm only going to give us 3 minutes. I know it's not very much time, but does that assignment make sense? All right, I'm going to start the timer now. You still have 2 minutes, plenty of time. Keep going. About 30 seconds more. Well, there's your timer. It's funny, when I was planning this, I thought 3 minutes is so short. No one could do anything in 3 minutes, but I feel like I have a pretty good list here. I would love to hear just maybe 2 or 3 people share? Just could someone, just without me calling on you, throw out some of the genres of writing that you did to help support that larger project? What did you do?
So I wrote down a bunch of stuff, starting with handwritten notes on the articles I was reading, a long Word document with article links, titles, and with notes and cut and pasted things. Getting to the point where I stopped reading and I started writing, remembering all the advice I'd gotten from my dissertation advisor. And then sitting down to write and facing all of the fears that go along with that, and not ever feeling quite ready to start.
Yeah, we can't imagine we can't ignore the emotions that are part of this, right? The feelings that are part of writing. What else? What are some other things? Some other writing you did?
I had a lot of the same things, but in addition, I would say like notes after doing something totally unrelated to writing, like taking a walk, because it came to me when I was walking or in the shower or driving or whatever, and copying out draft after draft and then writing all over the draft.
Yeah. So that it's writing when we're writing on our writing. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. I know I didn't type all the things Marlene said. What, any other little genres or things that you do or have done?
Sometimes it makes it easier if you separate it into pieces. Okay, I'm going to write the abstract now and then the introduction, and then maybe I want to think about the discussion later. So in science writing, you're going to have some different sort of genres that you're writing. And so if you separate it out, chunk it a little bit, and then schedule times. That was one thing. Sometimes if I don't really want to do it, I have to actually schedule the time to sit down and do the writing. A lot of times, some of the writing that I'll do is collaborative. So you got to work with someone else. So you have to figure out, are we going to use Dropbox? Are we going to put it on the G Drive? Or are we going to have a Canvas? Like, how are we going to work together? How are we going to collaborate with the writing? And some of it's just learning formatting. I need to be able to link stuff. Like I want it, like, I want to be able to link from the chapter title down to the chapter. Silly things that have nothing to do with writing that you need to learn in order to do a good job with a particular piece.
Absolutely. We all know that formatting is part of how we deliver anything.
And I was, pardon me, I was working on the revisions for the international studies major and the proposal for a minor. And I found that I was, writing different kinds of components. There's the one where you got to lay out what all the courses are and how it adds up. But then you have to write the catalog copy, which goes into the proposal forms. And then I had to also write the rationale, which was to a completely different audience, because that's to my faculty colleagues primarily, but the catalog copy is to students and the outside world or whatever. So it went through a bunch of drafts and a lot of sharing of it with different people and asking for feedback on, all 3 of those components.
Absolutely. I'm adding those, I'm assuming, emails to ask for feedback. Like,
yeah,
that's part of the writing that you had to do to get it.
Yeah, I'm not savvy enough to do what Deb said, like with Google Docs or whatever. I send an at least I'm not sending WordPerfect documents anymore.
Good old WordPerfect. Did I hear Mike earlier?
Yeah, I was just
last
one of the things that I had written down was, as I get, in addition, almost everything I've heard here was the writing that involves getting rid of the writing that I needed to get to the writing that I kept. Is like the hardest part, is realizing is taking out that 10-20% and just tightening. I find that to be one of the most exciting but also challenging parts of any process.
Yeah, it's the other way.
Mike,
Well,
I think some of the writing that we do, what we've had to do for HLC and some of the stuff that we've had to turn in is we come up with like I don't want to say an outline because I loathe outlines, but kind of like sequentially, like what are you doing? Where are the resources that apply to where you're at in the writing? I think Mike and I do that a lot when we work together. He's a writer, I'm not, I'm a helper. But I've written many of things for my MBA program and done research, and I do the same thing.
Absolutely. I've talked a lot with my writing center consultants about how they feel about outlines. And it's interesting how even sometimes when people say they hate outlines, they might say, well, I hate outlines, but I love, like, you know, in my own messy way, writing out a plan of where I think I'm going to go.
Yep.
Like, you could call that an outline. Depends what it means. Stephanie, were you going to say something? That'll be the last one.
Yeah, connected to what Mike just said about getting rid of things. And this is non-writing. This is intentionally taking time away from it, putting it away. I don't know if that counts because your head is still working, even if I mean it not to be. I mean to take a mental vacation, but putting it away so that when you come back, it's kind of clear that you've been palavering and you don't need those 2 sentences because they were the ones where you were trying to figure out what you meant and they're not very good.
Absolutely.
But it takes time to see that.
Absolutely. I'm listening to you, Stephanie, as I'm also reading in the chat. Kristen pointed out this question about, like, does anyone else draw their ideas, like literally visually draw them? And Jen Ray is like, yes. And Mary is saying, yeah, I write all over my books. And I would say I do that. Sometimes I'll draw an arrow, you know, like, oh, this connects to this. I could add all my own things, but you all have said them already. The main thing I was going to add was that I'm working on a collaborative project right now too, and we're using Slack in online place. We're also commenting on Google Docs. We're having whole conversations in Google Docs that sometimes bleed into emails, that sometimes bleed into Slack conversations. Sometimes we're just do it on text. So we're constantly talking about and writing about our ideas. It's a textbook project to help our ideas cohere, right? To figure out what it is we're trying to say in the first place here. And you could probably imagine my point here, right? We could do this all day. My real point, let me actually type it. I wasn't going to. My real point is that as professionals, as people who have had to write in high stakes context for many, many years, we have a lot of tricks up our sleeves. And I think a lot of times our students don't. A lot of times our students might say, this writing you're asking me to do just feels like busy work, or this writing you're asking me to do, why am I even bothering to do this? Really what I need to do is do the big hard thing that's really going to count more for my grade. And I think sometimes we have to think about ourselves, and we have to think about our own experiences and think, if I'm doing something that's actually really hard, especially if it requires research, especially if it's high stakes, personally, I have to do it in this kind of slow, messy way that takes a lot of time and takes a lot of collaboration and takes a lot of different kinds of writing, not just because someone's forcing me to, because the writing helps me think. So my real point here is that we as professionals have a lot of experience about how writing helps us think, that our students don't necessarily know or have yet. It's a pretty bad sentence, but you get my drift. So let me move on and tell you a little bit more about how I want to expand this conversation more, because in some ways, all these things we're saying, all the kinds of writing that we do to help us do our later writing is what I'm talking about today. The title of this was designing informal exploratory writing assignments. And really, I'm thinking of kind of all of the everything here. I'm kind of, often you'll hear some loose synonyms here used for the sorts of things I'm talking about. You probably have your own disciplinary words that you use or have used. The ones I'm using the most are exploratory writing that helps you explore an idea, explore what you think. And often I use that pretty close to writing to learn. Maybe that's a term that comes a little bit more from the writing across the curriculum scholarship. But people will say, it's one thing to write to learn, to figure out what it is I think, as opposed to writing for an audience, writing for a context, writing to persuade, or one of those other aims that our writing often does. To give myself a chance to not talk for a little bit, I gave you this quote. I don't know if you can read it or not, but I love it to help get a sense of kind of where I'm coming from here. So if you had a second, read that. To me, I feel like when I read this paragraph, I'm a little called out. I feel like sometimes I am asking my students to get up and give a performance, and just kind of saying, oh, well, they know how to write. They've been writing forever. When maybe I haven't asked them to write in this genre, in the style that I'm asking to, with the kind of moves that I'm asking them to make. I constantly have to remind myself that as I grow older and become a better teacher, my students stay the same age and they just have the same amount of knowledge coming in. We're always getting a little bit more distance from them. And I think sometimes we have to pull it back down. If we want to talk about, if this is a section on reasons for exploratory writing, we're all over. Why do this? There's so much out there. I can't summarize all of the research. I don't know all the research, right? I really do like the kind of personalized version in these bullets here. This guy, John Bean, wrote this pretty popular book called Engaging Ideas. And he gives what he calls thinking pieces, as you can see, very regularly. And sometimes these are in class, sometimes these are out of class. And he's kind of defending, well, why do I keep doing that? What does it do for me? And you can see it. I don't need to read it at you. But to me, the most important one here is this idea about critical thinking. This idea that sometimes and again, this applies to all of us, not just students, but if we're in the grind, if we're just doing what someone assigned to us, we're like, I have homework, I'll check it off, I have to do it. And we're kind of moving from thing to thing to thing to thing. Sometimes I think our goal as professors needs to be, I actually need you to slow down and apply some of your critical thinking here. And don't just treat this as a quick thing. I actually want you to think about why we're doing the thing we're doing. Why is the knowledge that we're discussing here actually valuable, like in the actual world, for all the reasons that being human is awesome. How is this helping you be a better human in society? And I think sometimes various kinds of writing has a funny way to kind of help thinking crystallize. Because you could say, why aren't we just having discussions, informal exploratory discussions here, right? Like, of course, discussions can do this too. But I do think there's something, and research seems to back up the idea that engraving something, whether digitally, whether by handwriting, maybe I saw in the chat people are talking about recording notes. I think any kind of way that we pause and make ourselves do something over again, or think through different wrinkles in our brain, it helps it become realer, right? I know I'm being scientifically squishy here, but you know what I mean. You can see all these other ways that this author Bean, the other one I wanted to point out was this idea that thinking pieces, the way that he assigns them, can actually be enjoyable to read. And he actually, later in the chapter, he poses this as one reason why when faculty say to him, I don't have time to do exploratory writing in my class, right? I'm so packed with content. I have so many things I have to get them to know, which of course I felt in my own way too, plenty of times. He said, sometimes I think the professors who are saying that don't realize how much you can get to know your students. When you say, you know what, let's not worry about the grammar and the punctuation and the structure right now. Let me give you some fun, creative, perhaps way to engage with these ideas in a new way. And as a professor, sometimes you can feel like you're getting to know them, you're getting to know just a more fun, loose side of them than you would otherwise. There's all kinds of other reasons to help students. So what I was doing is I was like, I don't know who's going to be here today. I don't know how much I have to convince you of various kinds of exploratory writing matter. So I thought, I wonder what the most recent meta-analysis of this research is. I wonder, could I find a recent article that's saying, okay, here are a lot of different studies out there. Let me pull those together. And I did find this 2016 article that specifically says it's not that. They're like, we are not a meta-analysis. We are just showing you some recent trends in writing to learn research, which again, remember, is kind of a synonym for the exploratory writing I'm saying. So I did type here just a few of the takeaways that they saw here. It's kind of over the page break, but some of the studies that they're we're turning to. This is one of these great articles that just has a huge works cited to say, oh, in this field, in this area, writing to learn has or hasn't been shown to work. And of course, people who study this get super in the weeds, right? Goes back to the 70s where people like James Britton were saying, any writing at all will help you think. And a lot of people in the 80s were like, tell me more what you mean, any writing at all. How exactly are we studying that? And what kind of writing and what kind of situations does it seem to help achieve, especially in course outcomes better when students are doing this sort of thing. But if this is all new to you, if you're skeptical, I guess the main thing I would say, to some extent, I just want to say, trust me and talk to me if you want me to point you towards some resources that will help see what exactly works and doesn't work in your field. At the bottom of this document, I've got a lot of examples and I've got some more links that will kind of point out to some of that if we have time to get there. I've been talking a lot. Any questions about any of the stuff in this kind of tan box before I move on to my next box? Awesome. That means we get to do another fun part. I want to try another writing activity that's maybe a little more creative. I hope you all are okay with this, and maybe a little more direct than we sometimes want to be in the Midwest. But I want you to write a dialogue. And when I say a dialogue, like I literally mean like a play, you know, where it says like Kyle and he says this thing, and then Orhan says this thing, right? And I want you to pretend a situation where you take the most skeptical parts of your mind right now, and you have that skeptical part of you, the actual you, talk to me, or if you want, talk to some other writing scholar. And in your dialogue, like I said, I want you to make yourself antagonistic and explain all the reasons why exploratory writing hasn't worked in the past or won't work in the future in your class. If you're not a teacher, I want you to think, what's another context where you can imagine you, the real you, saying, okay, that's great for classes and all, but for my world, exploratory writing, there's no time. It's not useful. It's not for this reason. In other words, I kind of want you to try expressing in kind of a playful way some of the doubts or questions that you might be having right now. Again, I will ask for us to have kind of a conversation like we did last time. I'll say, hey, what are some of the ideas that came up? If you really like a line or two, you'll be able to read it. But then I'm going to try to take some notes here about what you're thinking right now. And honestly, this is the main last thing I want to do. I do have some final notes and things, but I kind of want to reserve this big, long chunk of time here at the end, these last 20 or so minutes, to figure out what for us right here do we need to kind of make this work better and make different kind of exploratory writing worth it. So I'll be quiet. I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes first and see how that goes after 3. And if you want another 2, maybe I'll give them to you.
Kyle,
Yeah,
before you set your timer,
please.
could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I may have missed this somehow at the beginning, but could you give me a short definition of how you define exploratory writing?
Yes. What's hard is that, well, I said yes. Maybe I said yes too fast. I feel like you almost have to describe it with examples. And so I'm going to scroll way down to a part of this that I haven't shown yet to show you some examples of what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of times where you're in a class and you say, hey, everyone pause and do some writing about the discussion. And let's use that to kind of focus our discussion. Or I'm also including things where there's like a pre-test type writing. I'm also including, hey, write a letter to a politician about the topic we're talking about. But I'm also thinking of things outside of class too. And anytime that maybe you have a discussion board is probably the most common, where you say, hey, everyone, in an informal way, where I'm not worried about your grammar and punctuation, which I know in various disciplines we do more or less. I want you to share your ideas and get into a written discussion in hopes that will build to our later discussion. I'm also including things like reading journals. As you read, take a journal of the things that questions you have and the ideas and applications you might make it to something else. So Do you see how big and broad I'm trying to be? I'm
Oh, so is it synonymous with reflective writing? Or is it where something is being explored? Or I guess I don't know, maybe I'm the only one and I'll just be quiet
I'm
and,
sure you're not. I'm sure
but
you're not.
I'm not
I feel
sure
the same
what that
thing.
term means.
No, I get it. Let me look up how the book that I was leaning on a second ago. Let me look up how he defines it at the beginning, because I remember reading that and being like, oh yeah, that helps.
I mean, I don't want to take a bunch of time if I'm the only one that doesn't get this. I can have a separate conversation with you some other time.
No, let me read two.
I share your anxiety or concerns.
I'm sure it's not just you. Let me read two paragraphs, and this is again from Engaging Ideas, a book that I'll return to later. He says a lot of people prefer terms like this: informal writing, unstructured writing, personal writing, low stakes writing, free writing, journals, brainstorming, think writing, or non-graded writing. But whatever term we choose, what we mean is the kind of exploratory thinking on paper writing we do to discover, develop, and clarify our own ideas. It's typically loosely structured and tentative, moving off in unanticipated directions as new ideas, complications, and questions strike the writer in the process of thinking and creating. So the reason this is hard is because we all do this differently in our own lives, and we all assign it differently, if at all. So I'm the real opposite is formal essays. I'm almost saying anything that isn't a turn in something where you made sure that your APA format was just right, and you read it multiple times to make sure it was perfect. Anything that's just kind of a before that.
All right. All those synonyms helped.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
So stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
That one of many ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start my timer, but I'm only going to give you 3 minutes.
Sorry, I used up time.
So your 3 minutes are up. Does anyone want 1 or 2 more minutes before we kind of dive in? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'm also, please, Orhan.
I'm not sure if I get it correct. So I will ask you a question. I'll try to answer that. Would that be okay?
I love that. Yeah, please.
Okay. So here's a question. So what characteristics or qualifications do you seek in a person who you will ask for a proofreading? Is that what you were asking for me to ask? And then there should be an answer. Is this?
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you think? Someone's answer would be.
He or she.
You ask them, yeah.
Well, some people like they should not be in the know. Some people like they should be in the know. And then the other option would be a good reader, maybe. Did I get you correct? I'm not sure.
But I'm hesitating to type it because I think what I'm more interested in when we focus on proofreading, I almost think that's almost the opposite of what I want to think about here. If proofreading is the type of our time, it's when we write and we carefully think, okay, how can I shape this for my reader in the best way? And I think a lot of the exploratory writing I'm talking about isn't like that. It's writing where instead of stopping and questioning ourselves, did I do that right? Exploratory writing is where we just say yes to everything, where we say, yep, I don't know if this is going to take me somewhere, but I'm going to get this down on paper and help think it through, help connect my thinking to my writing.
Okay.
If that sounds fair.
I got it.
So what other things came up as you were writing this awkward assignment here to pretend you were maybe more angry than you were? What did you tell the hypothetical writing specialist?
I always have trouble leaving grammatical and punctuation errors alone because I fear that students will think that the way they have done it doesn't have any errors and that it's correct, and that they won't learn how to do it properly for the time when they need to do it properly.
Absolutely. Any responses to that? That are we if we assign informal exploratory writing, is it possible that we're training students to write poorly, like, or giving them a place where
Well,
it's okay? And it's not quite what you said. No.
Well,
yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to
Okay.
say we're training them to write poorly, but if we don't give them feedback on that kind of stuff, then they don't necessarily realize that it isn't correct.
Well, I frame it that way to explain that this is a way of developing ideas. I call it brainstorming.
Yeah,
And that
that would make
they
sense.
should recognize that writing is a way to generate ideas and think through ideas. And that there can be freedom and not sitting there stressing about where the comma fits.
No, you're absolutely right. I get
Yeah.
that, but that's one of the things that hinders me is that concern about reading something of theirs, not indicating any of those potential problems, and then having them think, oh, I guess it's all correct. But they probably don't think about that aspect of it. So,
Well, but I think if you explain it to them,
right.
then they get it.
Yeah. Now that I know what it is, then I can, yeah.
Any
Here's
other
a-
responses to that? What else would you do if you felt that fear? I bet a lot of us have.
I suppose it depends if you're collecting it or not, right? And so like if I say, I'm not collecting this, so just let yourself go, just let yourself generate ideas. And I think if I'm collecting it, then maybe there would be the sense of, well, if you took it and you saw this issue, you should let me know. But if, I guess a lot of the exploratory writing that I do, I don't collect.
Mm-hmm.
But that made me think of my angry question, Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a way to take up time in class, but it's only going to work for those who really do it. Like, what if I don't buy into this? What if I sit there and don't write?
Like what if a student doesn't? Like
Yeah, I'm playing
Yeah.
you said to be like, be play skeptical. I mean,
yeah. So
you
what if we try to get students to practice exploratory writing, like I kind of said earlier, like
Yeah.
trying to say, hey, I want to train you to a way that professional writers do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And someone just pushes back and doesn't want to.
Yeah.
What do you do in that case, or is anyone?
Yeah, what do you do in that
happen, or
case?
how do you-
I tell them to draw pictures, keep the pen moving.
Okay.
I do. I say draw pictures on the margin. At least keeping your pen going too helps to generate ideas.
Has anyone tried that? Like where you say, like, I want you to do some kind of writing where like literally you shouldn't stop. Like actually keep your pen going. That's one common method people.
I tell them to keep writing and write about why they can't write about what, right? Well, just keep words coming. Even if you're just mad at me, then why is he making me write?
Yeah.
But I do a parallel with running. If you're in track, you just run. You don't think about it. You have to just, that's the only way you're going to get better. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested too. You didn't quite say this, Mike, but I wonder if there's a question there about grading. I'm kind of writing multiple questions inspired by yours. I wrote down the should we collect it, but grading it to me almost feels like one of the reasons why someone might have that attitude of your hypothetical student, right? They're like, you're not going to grade this. Why do I care? There's nothing for me that's pushing me to do this or not.
Yeah, that was my other question, or my other argument.
And any thoughts on that part? Should we grade this kind of thing? And if we don't, how do we encourage students to actually do it well?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is that I'm driving while listening to you. So, well, I was thinking that in even teaching a second language, sometimes you have students who are so concerned about mistakes that they cannot keep going with their writing. And there is a moment when I feel I need to let them know that they can just write and then we can check everything together. And sometimes even when they are expressing, when they are talking, just orally participating in class, I am sometimes more interested on what they want to say than how they are using Spanish. Because if you let them, as long as you let them know that, well, I am not focused now more on your, spelling or your mistakes than verifying that communication is taking place, they should know, and the good students know that they will correct themselves when they see that something was not the way it should be said. Right. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, it does. And I think you're reminding me of what Mary said at the beginning, that however we do this, it's very important to help our students see the purpose of what we're getting at. As I was planning this, and of course we tried some exploratory writing of our own here, I was realizing that was probably a main way that I failed, that I was just said, hey, do this fun thing. And you're kind of like, what? I'm kind of assuming that you trust me enough to play along. But in a real class context, I would really want to, maybe in writing, kind of give them a really clear, this is the purpose of what we're doing. This is the kind of things how I hope it achieves. This is maybe even the kind of research that supports that this will help you. Here's proof that professionals like me do it. Let me show you some of my exploratory writing. Here are some examples of real students in the past who have given me permission to share theirs. Sometimes all of that kind of we need to convince students essentially that it's worth their time. Because that student who's frozen, who thinks I have to do it all perfect in the first draft, often I think is afraid they're not going to have time. I have to do this in the first draft because I can't come back later. I can't do multiple drafts. Who has time for that? I have 6 jobs and 9 kids. But but you get it, right? If we can convince them that this might actually help your later stages be easier if you loosen up a little bit and you write in an exploratory way early.
But also I wanted to add something about exploratory writing and the literary essay. I think that there is a connection between both of them, because sometimes with your exploratory writing, you begin just finding out some ideas, maybe crazy at the beginning, but they can end up being part of a very interesting and crucial literary essay.
Yeah, so I'm writing some of our messier ideas. I know you don't necessarily mean messy, but some of our exploratory ideas can surprise us, can end up being crucial and interesting, especially if we're trying to get to those critical thinking connections, right? We're trying to help students apply knowledge that we're doing to new contexts, to new ideas, to the things in their lives, the things they're hearing about. Of course, so they have to have a chance to be surprised. They have to have a choice to yeah, I don't need to repeat it.
This reminds me of,
yeah, please.
I taught a writing class in the summer to high school students, like to minority high school students as part of a college prep program up at University of Wisconsin once. And on the first day of class, and it was a 3-week class, the first day of class before introducing myself, they had all sat down and I wrote the word face on the board. And I said, for the next 10 minutes, you're going to write. So just write in response to this word. And I didn't say anything else. And in response to that, and I kind of gave them the don't stop writing and all of that stuff. In response, once they shared what they had written, and the subtitle of the course was, how do I see the world? Let me write the ways, right? Was just in response to that word. Some of them saw it as a verb. Some of them saw it as a noun. Some of them wrote poems. Some of them wrote dialogue. Some of them, just the variety of responses to that one word, it sort of illustrated the point that when you explore through writing, you discover something. I think that, especially when a student, my question had to do with Kyle, students feel like these exercises are useless or pointless if they're not graded, right? So I think when you can illustrate or show students that they will discover something about how they see things through the process of writing, then they start to see that there's a connection and a practical purpose just to the exercise of writing. So the end is no longer whether you get a grade, but what you discover about what you think.
And that's, again, something that realization to sink in, I feel like has to happen multiple times in a student's life for it to sink in. And not just a student, again, it had to happen multiple times in my life for it to sink in. So that's what we're giving them whenever we give them a chance to practice. I did not do my time well because we're at 3:49, and I do have a couple things I want to close us out with. Obviously, if you have to run, feel like you can run. If you want to stay and talk, we can. I'm sure you have all kinds of things you wrote down about possible issues. I wrote down a couple of things that I hoped we would get to sometime in our conversation. I would say most of these we have been mentioned. We haven't talked much about managing the load. There's a lot of good advice out there about how you don't necessarily have to read it, or you could just read some, or you could skim it really quickly. There are a lot of various ways to grade it or almost ungrade, to kind of let students know, hey, I am holding you to this, and I do want to train you to do it better, but I'm also not worried about it, in the same way that I'm worried about the larger, more complex essays. So with the end of this document, which again, you can get to yourself, it was in the chat, and there's a link to it there. I'll also put a link to this on our portal page. At the bottom of this doc, there's all sorts of examples that I've kind of been curating, ones that I think are particularly interesting, and I was trying to find ones from a lot of different perspectives. So I'll go back up to this. So if you go through, essentially what I did is I went to one website and I said, oh, there's a ton of examples here. Here are some that I really liked, but you can always click the link and open it and see some on your own. Same thing here. I was talking to a friend of mine who also runs these kinds of workshops all the time. And I said, what do you do when you're teaching this? And she's like, oh, I have this little PDF I give everyone by hand. And I was like, well, I'm not going to see them in hand. And she's like, here, just give them the PDF. So to that, like from that, with some citations, a few more examples, some from ecology, from math, from business classes, et cetera, et cetera. I even found a psychology essay where people were they were doing a really, kind of like social scientists do, like, okay, we are going to study if we give our students exploratory writing, how exactly is that going to help compared to a control? And they found in their psychology classes, it helped retention and it helped achieve the course outcomes, and using these prompts. So I am always open, as always, to talk more through ideas for your classes. You know your classes better than I do, so I'm not an expert here, but just sometimes brainstorming out loud can help. We could even exploratory write together if you think that would be useful. But I do want to end by saying two things. One, I'm going to give another workshop like this in April that will be almost like a follow-up, but almost like another level. If we think of a large umbrella of exploratory writing, I would say that one particular kind of exploratory writing is the stuff that happens after the assignment, after someone's written that essay, after they've given that presentation, after they've done something. And that's how I would define reflective. I saw that Kristen and Catherine had a little bit of talk in the chat about what reflective means, different kinds of terminology. I haven't read it all, but I'm kind of hoping to keep this conversation going, but also focus it in that little different way there. Finally, I did apply for a professional development grant this year and got approved to buy 15 copies of that book that I've referred to a couple of times, this Engaging Ideas. It's like this big fat thing. That's why it costs $45. But what I like about it is that it's written for people all over the spectrum of various kinds of wherever they're at in teaching writing in all kinds of disciplines. It's filled with citations if you want to look up the specific proof of different kinds of efficacy of things, but it also just has a lot of practical, how should I respond to my student writing? What are the ideas for exploratory? And he's got, I think, 22 more ideas in that book. The publisher has told me they'll give people free access to a digital version if they want. If that's you, just tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to get the names of the people who are here and just email all of you and say, hey, do you want to be on that list? Do you want the free book? Haven't got it yet. I'm still waiting for the invoice. Has been taking a while from the actual publisher, but my hope is within a month to have those in hand and kind of put them in all your boxes. So just so you know, I would love to kind of help people go to the next level with resources like that. It's 3:53, so that is all that I have. Again, hang out if you want to talk about more questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank
Thought-provoking.
you.
Yes,
Hope to hear more, Kyle. Thank you.
always.
Thank you,
Kyle.
Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
You.
Always interesting.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording
Yeah.
if that's okay. Thank you,
Totally.
Kyle.